Hey, artistic humans, Paul Sizer here again. Thank you so much for rejoining me here in Cafe Digital Studios in the heart of Sizer Design and Illustration. So, all this week we've been talking about making things dimensional, giving things volume, being able to draw things, shapes, forms, inorganic forms, and human forms, and give them a feeling of being actually in physical space, having depth, having volume, and being able to take a look at those surfaces and draw things that enhance the illusion that that surface is moving in three-dimensional space. So it only stands to reason that eventually we'd get to clothing, that wonderful thing that everybody gets to wear. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about how you can use the things that we've been practicing with drawing forms, with drawing dimensional forms, and translate that into how clothing works, how fabric works, how different types of fabric works, and how we're using it to agree with what the form is doing and make that stuff work in concert with it so that it doesn't look like it's a paper doll and just paste it on top, that it actually looks like if there's clothing that it's wrapping around a body, that it's laying across a part of a body, it's hanging from the body in a naturalistic way. And so, enough of that. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got here. So I decided to start out with just kind of a basic body form. This is a drawing that I had done of Monica Rambeau from Captain Marvel and from the Avengers. And she is going to be our mannequin for today. She's going to be our body that we are going to begin hanging clothes off of, and talking a little bit about how cloth and different types of cloth and different types of materials are going to play with this. So I picked this pose just because it's kind of got a bunch of things that we can work with and play off of. We've got the idea of being able to hang things off of arms, but we also have kind of just a general torso here, and then we've got a hand that's coming straight at the camera, and then her head. Now, she's already got some of her superhero costume on here, but I figured that we can go ahead and just sort of accessorize or add to this and use her as our base that we're going to start building off of. So when we've talked about other things with faces, with how body parts or features on a face, features with hair, that kind of stuff, we've talked about it agrees with the form that it's laying on, meaning that when we have lines, those lines follow the contour of stuff, that they go across, they go down, they move, they mold, and they map to what we're seeing. So the same thing is really happening with clothes. So the way that I tend to work with this is that a lot of times, depending on the types of clothes that we have, different ways are going to be doing at this. So let's go ahead and take just a quick look at a few of the visual cues that I built in on her superhero costume here. Now, once again, we talked about how that if we have things like lines for, say, gloves in this case, or a wrist area on this drawing, that when we're drawing this stuff, we're not drawing, they may be a straight edge or straight line for, say, the base of the glove or the cuff, but the way that I'm indicating that it's going around this is that it's a curved line. So that curved line is, again, mapping to the surface of her arm, and it's giving us a visual clue that it's wrapping around her arm, and it's not just flat two-dimensionally going around her arm here. So the costume that we have her in here is fairly form-fitting. There's not really anything it's mapping her forms, so think of it as kind of like that this is kind of a spandex or lycra type form. So it is essentially showing the exact contour of her body, of her torso, and of her arms. So there's really not anything with this that is not accurate to how her body would be underneath the clothing. So what we'll do is we'll use this as a starting point, but we'll also take a look at this and figure out how we're going to add to this. So just so that we can see it differently, I'm going to go ahead and do the drawing for clothing stuff on this other layer here that is marking in red, so that we can see the baseline in blue here. We can see the form that we're working with, but we're going to go ahead and have the clothing layer just so we can see it and differentiate it from the body underneath. And a lot of times when I'm drawing stuff like this digitally, If I'm using a reference shot or if I'm using a pose, a lot of times what I will do is go ahead and have kind of the body pose, kind of the life drawing pose beneath like this. So I would be using where I would go through and I would essentially draw kind of like a reference body form that would not have any clothing on it, that would just be the main parts of the body, the main attributes of that body as far as the shape of a figure, musculature, form, the curvature of the body, that kind of stuff. And again, the reason that I would have this stuff here is because I'm going to be using these all as forms that I'm going to drape stuff off of, wrap stuff around, or do things to with clothing, with equipment, with other things that that's going to be on top of this body. So a lot of times I will work in multiple layers like this, where one layer of pencils would kind of act as my base, like I said, base mannequin, and then I would go in so that I can change it and have a layer where I would do specifically the clothing stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So the main thing that I always say that when we're starting out with thinking about clothing is that clothing, like hair and everything else, is affected by gravity, meaning that as it lays across stuff, it will be affected and pulled down by gravity that affects everything on Earth. So we can make a decision about how much the clothing or the material that we're using is affected by that gravity. So heavier things like leather, heavier cottons, different materials and stuff like that would be like heavier kind of cloths. Those are going to be maybe more affected by gravity, where lighter things like silk or very light materials might be less affected by gravity and might be affected also by wind, by blowing around, by air, by movement of the body, and that kind of stuff. So again, how we draw this stuff affected by gravity gives us a clue as to how it's going to be actually acting on the body. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at, let's put some stuff here. Let me zero out a little bit. Yeah, let's just kind of, there we go. All right, so if I begin to say, like, let's say that I'm going to give her a sleeve on here as part of a shirt, and it's something that maybe goes down to her elbow and then kind of stops. The general rule is that when you are putting clothing on a body, that it is always going to be snuggest against the top of the form, and then at the bottom of the form is where you're going to have a little bit of a looser feel to it. So if I was going to be putting her, say, like in a looser fitting cotton shirt over this costume or something like that, I would travel and sort of push the stuff along the top of her arm and stay pretty true to that. But that if I'm doing stuff down here, I'm going to place and have this stuff a little bit looser so that it falls away from the arm. So let me go ahead and just kind of draw this, and I'll explain what I'm doing here. All right. So what I did is, along the top of her arm, the clothing fits the contour and pretty much goes along. I put a few wrinkles here, again, assuming that this isn't skin tight. It's like spandex, that this is a cotton shirt that might be have some wrinkles and folds on it, but it's still staying pretty close to the edges of the top of her arm here. But as it falls along her arm, it goes down at a curve like this. So again, that emphasizes the dimensionality of the arm. And then it goes down here, and we can see that there's kind of a gap underneath here where it would fall away from her arm and it would not be super tight to the arm. So if we're talking about this as being kind of like a loose shirt, that's going down there. And let's take a look also at what we're looking at, which I would call bend points. And what these bend points are is that when your body bends, things fold and creases happen, and it happens in your skin, it happens in clothes, and everything else like that. So what you saw me doing here is that I always look at sort of the focus point of where a bend happens, sort of the origin point of that bend, and then I always spread the folds that I have out from that. So for instance, along here, there's a little bit of a fold, and I had that where that fold changed direction, I put a little bit of a contour line there. where this goes down and where it hits her, the inner part of her elbow. This part, again, we get a fold here. So where the fabric is changing direction, where that center point, where that focus point is, I'm pulling the bends or the folds in the cloth out from that origin point and kind of having them radiate out. So you can see that, you know, with here, if we kind of track this back, maybe right there is the point of where, like her, like say maybe around here is where the armpit is, where the actual fold happens. And then from there, the folds radiate out. So you see that they're kind of coming out, kind of splaying out like a radius of a circle. The same thing here. If this is the bend point right here, the folds that I have coming from that are radiating out from there. So yeah. So the same thing is if, let's go ahead and view out just a tiny bit here. If I'm going to be mapping clothing again to her body, and let's go ahead and work on the base part of this, or the back part of the shirt. Again, if it's a tailored shirt, if it's something that is not necessarily form-fitting, but it's tailored so that it is meant to mimic or to enhance her form, that it would follow and take a lead from how it's hanging off of the body. But it's not absolutely, again, it's not spandex. So it's going on the back here. So if I was going to do the back part of the shirt, maybe a little bit back there. And we can say that, let's say that maybe what we have her wearing is sort of like maybe like a shirt over a t-shirt. So this would be a shirt that's unbuttoned and open in the front, and she has a t-shirt underneath. So again, I'm going to go ahead and look at where the body bends a little bit. So again, she's kind of got a very a little bit of an arched back here as this poses. She's standing up very straight. Her torso comes in here. It goes in a little bit around her midriff area, and then as it extends out into her hips. So let me go ahead and do kind of the front part of the shirt here. So again, taking a look at where direction change happens is informing where I'm putting these lines here, where I'm putting places where the shirt is going to have folds, and it's where things crease or where things are bending. So this is kind of tricky here, but this is a good one to do. Her hand that is coming like straight at you is very, very foreshortened. This is called foreshortening. Foreshortening is the optical illusion that things, when they come at you like this, are very distorted. They're very kind of shrunk down. So, excuse me, her hand looks very big here, and we don't see much of the length of her arm because it's coming straight at us. So we're looking at it very foreshortened. But we would, if we were kind of like looking down her shirt sleeve, that we would see a little bit of indication of that. So I'll go ahead and just kind of, we would see, again, very kind of straight in there. Not very much in there, but yeah, so I think we've got like kind of like a good idea. Excuse me, mercy. We've got the basic look of the shirt here, foreshortened on the sleeve, and then if I was doing this other side here, again, like I said, if this is an open shirt and she has a t-shirt underneath it, then I would go ahead and let's just kind of like block in like the other half of that shirt there. This would be the kind of the back half. So again, we're doing things that are giving indications of mapping to the body. So again, the bottom part of the shirt here has a little bit of a curve feel to it. The front part of the shirt here, again, even if it's coming down straight on her body is not an absolutely flat plane here. So by having the curvilinear line here, it's indicating that it is traveling off of her shoulders, it's going across her breast, and it's then falling down and going to her waist and hip area here. So again, all these things, even though they're not absolutely following exactly the contour of the body, they are being affected by the contour of the body, and these curvilinear lines give us ideas about how that works and gives us clues as to how that's happening. So in the same thing, let's zero in a little bit here. As we were talking about, if I'm going to be mapping stuff about, say, if she's wearing a t-shirt underneath this, a t-shirt is probably going to be a little bit more form-fitting than this looser cotton shirt that she has on top of it. So again, if I'm going to go ahead and kind of map that in, I would, again, have that sort of follow closer along her body. And then when it gets down here to where kind of near the top of where her pants would be, again, I'm just sort of a little indication here. And again, you can see here that while I've got the under area of where her breast is, the actual dimensional feel that I have for the shirt is that it's laying atop them, but then it's not absolutely, again, it's not skin tight latex. So I'm drawing the shirt so that it follows the contours of the curves that she has, but that it also gaps away from the body in the way that a shirt would. So same thing here. If I'm going to do, again, the top collar of the shirt, I'd sort of have again, a curvilinear line for the neck, and kind of connect that up there. And then the same thing with this is that if I've got indications of, see if she's wearing jeans or something like that, I can make a decision about how I want to show the jeans on her. So they might have a little bit of, again, gaps of where they're not exactly where sometimes they're being pulled tight to the body, and there's some points where they may be a little bit more looser, a little bit more away from the body. So again, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of figure that out. Same thing, her zipper that would be on the front of her pants. Even though, again, we say it's a straight line, I would have that be straight, a curvilinear line to, again, follow the curve of her pelvis. And then I would have the area down here where we're going to the top of her legs, at the base of the pelvis. And the same thing is that as I'm placing in, as I'm taking a look at where, again, where things gather, where they come together, then I'm radiating out fold marks from there. So any place that fabric is changing a direction, that's the radius point from which folds exist. So the same thing here, if around her belt or at the base of her pelvis is a place where the fabric is changing direction, that's where folds are going to be. And the same thing is that, again, if she has a pocket along the side of her edge here, or the side of her pants, again, a curvilinear line going to the the rivet that's there. There's a seam on those jeans. Curvilinear lines, again, mapping the body, mapping the edge of how that body looks. And then the same thing here is that as I begin to zero in on details, I'm going to go ahead and let me make the kind of the base thing a little more subtle here, just so we can kind of see just the clothing. So the same thing here. I would make a few alterations. We might have a few more wrinkles on the t-shirt, again, just to kind of show it reacting to where things are gathered, where it's coming down from the neck, where it's going across the breast, where it's moving around the stomach and the main part of her torso, and as it moves down here as well. So again, I'm not really even necessarily worried about how the specifics of. I'll start thinking about things like the collar and all that kind of stuff. But you can see that as we're kind of starting here, this shirt and the t-shirt that's beneath it, they all are agreeing with the bottom form that's beneath it. They're agreeing with the mapping of the volumetric forms that live underneath it, and we are giving lots of visual clues that these t-shirts, these jeans, this cotton shirt on top are all conforming to and reacting to the body that lives beneath them. The same thing up here as well. Like, let's go ahead and take a look at her head. And I kind of already drew this, but again, taking a look at the headband that she's wearing. Again, I'm using a curvilinear line, and where things gather here, where it might be a little bit bunched up, or where it changes direction. Those the curved lines that are putting there are showing where the fabric pinches, where it comes together, where it's changing or coming together. And again, the lines are radiating out from there, from a central point, splaying out and being curved, so they again are making the agreement of the mapping of the rest of the form that's beneath it. So again, if I wanted to extend that out, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So let's, this is not going to be a fashion class, so we're going to kind of put a bunch of different clothing on her. So again, the same thing here is that if I wanted to show that maybe she's out gardening in her garden and, taking a little bit of a break from doing Avengers and going out and seeing whether or not her kale is ready to pick. So same thing, if I put gardening gloves on her, again, let's kind of take a look at how this goes. So we are looking at, again, the kind of the base costume that I had her in. Again, like a very form-fitting kind of spandex thing. The stuff that we drew here, a little more casual clothing, t-shirt, cotton shirt, jeans. They conform to the body, but they're not necessarily exactly, right contouring to the body itself. So this is like lighter material. So again, as we're showing this, it's flowing a little bit. We're seeing that it's moving, but it's also kind of flying away from the body. So again, if it's lighter fabric, it'll tend to kind of move with wind or movement. It'll kind of have a little bit of a life of its own. But let's go ahead and take a look at how we would do something that's like a very different kind of material. Like, let's say that she's wearing gardening gloves. It might be made out of like a heavier leather or something like that. So again, that's something where we're going to be working with a fabric that is a little more stiff, a little thicker, and it's not going to necessarily absolutely conform to the body shape. It will be informed by it, but it's not going to be like a spandex or a rubber glove. This will be something where we're going to have a little bit of a thicker material. So if I was going to draw kind of like leather or very thick gloves on this, let's go ahead and we'll start down here. Same thing, I would kind of wrap that base of the glove around there. But this is something that if I'm going to be showing this, I'm going to have kind of thicker, more chunky kind of folds, and the folds are going to be a little more angular. They're going to be a little bit more less sweeping and a little bit more geometric. And the way that I'm doing that, or why I'm doing that, is because this is a heavier material. So it's not going to have as much of a flow like silk does. Leather is going to be a little bit thicker, and it's going to be a little bit more angular in how it folds for thick leather like this, like for a work glove. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and move this around. So again, as I begin to make those folds in the gloves, for this, because like with a glove like this, it might be something that's kind of like a one size fits all. I'm going to just kind of like loosely contour this to her glove, but this is something that's not meant to be right to her hand. It'll be relatively close. So I'm going to draw these kind of clunky. Let's just go ahead and do that. So again, we've got where things change direction, where things are moving around and doing that. We're seeing that these things that we have curvilinear lines that are showing the wrapping around a form, wrapping around the fingers. Again, just visual clues to how this is working. And again, if there's seams on the glove, if there's things that I'm looking at here where I'm kind of mapping those to the edge of that glove. Yeah. So again, not completely alien to how we drew the shirt, but it's definitely a little chunkier, a little less form-fitting, but it has a little bit more of a feel of a heavier material. All right. So yeah, so there we've got Monica and her gardening stuff. So let's, I think for right now, so again, we've got like functional clothing. This is, again, just how kind of normal everyday clothing would go. So I'm going to go ahead and you can see that, and I'm going to go ahead and let's get rid of that. And let's take a little bit of a look at maybe doing like a slightly more kind of dynamic feel to this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of scale this down just a touch here, so that we can see a little bit more of her body. And we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of doing a little more dynamic clothing, or dynamic costuming. So there we go. There's a little bit more space around her and stuff like that. All right. So from that, what I was going to say is that when we're talking about more dramatic clothing, again, capes, cloaks, that kind of stuff, the same kind of rules are going to apply, but we're going to go ahead and kind of use the same idea here. So let's go turn that off and go to my clothing. All right. So if I was going to drape a cape off of her body, and so let's imagine that she has like a very long, kind of almost body length from her shoulders almost to the ground cape. I'm going to do the same thing. It'll have the same parameters that we worked with doing the normal clothing, but these are going to be a little bit more exaggerated, a little bit more, again, for the effect that they have, a little bit more for having a kind of a vibe, having a little bit more of a dynamic feel to them. So, but the same basic rules apply. So again, if it's a cape, it's going to be something that's going to be gathered around her neck. It will be going across her shoulders, and then it'll be falling away from the body in a dramatic way. So in that same way, if I was doing this, I would start out with lines up top here that would, again, be hooking around her neck as it comes to, as like a clasp or something like that. And I'm going to have it go so it's going over her shoulders. So again, contouring the lines, curving them so that they are adhering to the fact that it's going from the center of her, the base of her neck, and then moving along the side of her shoulders. This side would be kind of obscured, I guess, by her hand. So we'll just sort of like imagine, you know, I'll draw this line here just to kind of imagine like the drape of that cape going over here. And then when I do capes, I try and do really long, graceful, kind of single lines, because that's how fabric works. And so, again, a cape is going to have a little bit of a kind of flying in the air a little bit. It's going to have a little bit more, if it's a lighter quality thing, it will not be adhering to the body. It will be have a little bit more of life of its own. So again, and the same thing is that you can see that as I'm kind of drawing my guidelines for how that cape's going to go, again, long, graceful lines. And again, I'm imagining, again, that this part here that I'm dotting is that cape that's going to be hidden by our arm, but then when it gets past that arm, it gets over here. And again, it's coming from a point where it's gathered or bunched on her shoulder, and then as it falls off the shoulder, it splays out. So in the same way, we've got that radius point here that starts out. So we have a radius point here. So the folds or the drapes of the cape are going to start from that radius point and going to kind of radiate out. So we can see, again, here's the thing where, again, this is close to her body because it's on the top where gravity is pulling down. And as this falls away from that top of the body and falls down, it becomes more full at the bottom there. So what I also will do is, if I have a cape or if I have fabric that's going to end, a lot of times what I might do, and actually let's, I'm going to do a few undos here. If I'm determining, or if I have an edge of a cape or a way that I want that cape to end, a lot of times what I might do is kind of do kind of a curved line like this. Because this is like let's say if this is the baseline of the cape, then I know that I'm starting up here and this is where I want to end. So what I can do is kind of use those and look at the sort of the apex of those curves and use those to pull that where the edge of that cape is. Now again, I'm just this is just stuff that I would be doing again in sketching, so it doesn't have to be perfect, and I can certainly kind of go in and like kind of adjust this stuff. But again, you can see that what I'm doing is I'm pulling from the that focus point, and then that cape is going down here, and again I'm curving it. I'm putting a curved bottom on those, even if it's a straight cape at the bottom. That curve is showing that these are folds that are billowing out, that they have dimensional feel to them, that they have a kind of feel. Again, it's rippling. Same thing up here. If I have this line here, I would attach to that part of the cape, and I might just make a decision to maybe alter that a little bit so there's a little bit of a gap to that cape. And when we talk about form, again, we're using just very basic things for showing dimensional feel. So again, these folds in the cape here, you can see that are here. They're stacked, so they're overlapping, and overlapping is a way that we can show dimension. So you can see that these folds that are falling back here are they're sort of like I'm stacking them behind, so that they go. So the same thing is that we've got a very open cape here. So again, this looks like it's falling away from her body, that it's freer, kind of flapping in the wind, has a little bit of a feel like that. Let's go ahead and take a look here. So again, the same way that we're contouring shirts, if we gave her sort of a waist sash or something like that was gathered, do the same thing. So why don't I go ahead and let's build in something that would kind of act like a clasp here. So we'll put that kind of on her hip. So we'll just kind of put, whatever. At least you might have borrowed that from, there you go, a star clasp or whatever. Okay. So if I wanted to have that, then what we could do is, again, if I wanted to have this where it was kind of a sash that maybe goes around her waist and then it's kind of free, again, I would just sort of start from my area where I have the origin point of where the fabric is, and then just kind of wrap it around her waist, and then as it begins to go here, then I'm doing the outside, and again where it changes direction, that's where folds are happening. And that my folds also happen where things gather, so they radiate out from here. So again, if we look at sort of seeing this as sort of like the gathering point or the pinch point of that fabric, that's where those folds would go, and then they would wrap around. And the same thing here, just again contouring that so that it wraps around the back from her hip to her the back side here toward the front. Again, all these lines here are reinforcing the dimensional wrap of going around the bottom part of her abdomen. And then same thing, let's view out a little bit. And if I wanted to have this be something where maybe there's a single sash that comes out of here. And I always try and kind of do this stuff kind of loose and then figure out the logistics of it so that it has a nice feel to it. So you can see that, again, this has where it's gathered here, and then it's allowed to kind of splay out. So let's say I wanted to do, so let's put another one there. Just again, just sort of, just kind of connect the lines, but allow yourself to kind of sketch a little bit loosely and have the gracefulness that flow has. And I think that you'll get stuff that looks a lot more elegant, a lot more nice feeling. And that has a little bit more of an organic feel to it, so it doesn't look like it's stiff and weird and all that. So, yeah. And then the same kind of thing. Like, let's say if we wanted to give her a little bit more of maybe a kind of a fabric mask here. Same thing. I would contour it to her face. So let's kind of gathering behind her ear here. Then as it goes to the front. And then showing contour lines. So again, as it falls across the bridge of her nose, maybe a few lines just to indicate that that's going up to the ridge of her nose and traveling over it. So this would be a hard line. And then kind of the eye holes in that mask. And again, like I talked about with faces and stuff like that, you want to have enough a few good lines to show where folds are, but if you put too many lines there, it's going to look like it's crinkly or wrinkled or not look elegant. So again, the less amount that you can do with good lines is going to always have that economy of line that's going to make things look a little bit better. So same thing here. If this gathered behind her and she had kind of it tied in a bow or a knot, again, the crinkle lines to where the knot comes together behind her head there. So yeah. So there we go. There's a little bit more of a. I know this goes against the Edna mode. No capes, but sometimes capes are kind of cool, so you can play around with that. So yeah, like I said, I think that in taking a look at this is always a good. It's a good way to think about fabric, and to do things like this are going to help your characters have a little bit more of a dimensional feel. Even if you're doing more kind of like cartoony type figures, still just small little things like this are going to give a little bit more of a feel of having a three-dimensional feel to them. And again, as you work through this, you'll find kind of a balance point of how much detail to put in to make it look like a certain fabric. But again, like I've said with all this other stuff, the best thing you can do is take a look from life. Pull out some of the clothes that you have, or have your brother or sister or somebody else kind of model different clothes for them and see how they work. So have somebody wear a very like a heavy coat, or have somebody wear like a very very thin T-shirt, or if you have friends who have stuff that's made out of silk or very fine fabric, have them wear that, and have them bend their arms or put their arms over their heads or cross their arms or twist and stuff like that, and see how that stuff moves across the body, how it moves when it folds, all kinds of stuff like that. And I think that you'll get kind of a better idea of how to show, what's the difference between how a leather jacket that somebody's wearing, how does that fold, or if somebody has a very sheer silk top or a silk shirt, how does that fold in a different way. So again, observe, take a look around you, have people pose for you. That's always good too. And yeah. So I think that's all we need to say about clothing. I would say the assignment that I would say is go ahead and either find a photo or have somebody pose for you, and try and draw the clothes that they're wearing, and try to differentiate and see, take a look. If you're looking for a picture, take a look and have somebody who is wearing a combination of different kinds of clothes. So maybe like we did, if it's something where maybe the person is wearing a T-shirt but a heavier jacket or a leather jacket over it, or if somebody is wearing capes, or somebody is wearing like a long sash, or an elegant dress that gathers at the top and maybe comes across and kind of flows out from the body. Take a look at how to draw people who are wearing things that are very form-fitting, spandex, superheroes, that kind of thing too. But even with superheroes, take a look at the difference between how like modern superheroes kind of dress. A lot of them are like kind of like tactical clothing that has maybe a little bit more kind of heft to it, a little bit more of sturdy material. But also take a look at kind of more fantasy superheroes and stuff like that, where they had clothing that maybe didn't make as much practical sense, but was kind of just cool to look at. So take a look at that kind of stuff. See, I would say the assignment is try and draw somebody who's wearing a combination of clothing that you can show different attributes of the different kinds of clothing they're wearing. Heavy fabric, light fabric, different textures of fabric, all kinds of stuff. and try and clothe the character or draw those things as accurately as possible so that they look like they're following to the body form. So that's all I think we need to talk about today. Thank you again for watching. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments or send them to me via email. I'm happy to take a look at what you've drawn, and I think that's all we need to talk about for clothing today. So once again, thank you very much for stopping by, sitting here, listening to me blab and draw capes on people, and keep drawing good stuff. Be nice to people, and draw every day. And I will talk to you very soon. Thanks again. Take care.